Henry. I'm a vocational coordinator at Paris High School in Paris, Arkansas. Today is February 14th, 2004, and I'm here to interview Mr. Chester Strom, a Pearl Harbor survivor from Boonville, Arkansas. Strom, could you tell me your first name?
Chester.
Chester Strom.
Chester J. John.
Chester John. And when were you born?
August 17th, 1913.
And your age today?
90 years and 6 months.
90 years and 6 months. Well, you don't look a day over 70.
In 3 more days it'll be 6 months.
Where were you born?
Thief River Falls, Minnesota. August 17th, 1913. Which is about 300 miles northwest of Minneapolis.
And it's cold there.
It's very cold.
It's very cold. Were you, and you told me a while ago, you signed up for the Navy. You wanted to join up. They didn't have the draft then, did they?
No, April 22nd, 1940.
Well, was it difficult for you when you joined the Navy and left home for the very first time because you were young? Were you nervous about leaving home?
Well, yeah, it wasn't the very first time I left home because I was pretty much of a tramp and I loved to travel. And when I was only about 13, 14 years old, I got a freight train and rode out to the west coast, Seattle, Washington. One place I used to like to stop was Whitefish, Montana. There was a lake called Whitefish. And it was loaded with whitefish in that little tiny town. And I used to stop there and camp there for several days, and then when I got tired of it, I'd grab the freight again and go out. I got to Seattle. I was only about 14 at that time, but every summer, I would grab these freights before I graduated and ride out to the west coast. I was in Montana and Idaho. I went down to Butte, Montana. I loved to wander around, and these freight crews began to know me because I was riding back and forth all the time.
They didn't mind you getting on the train?
No, they didn't. In fact, it kind of slowed down. When I was at Whitefish, I'd catch these nice, great, big whitefish. Right? They must have been 2 feet long, and I'd gut them and wrap them in mud. The Indians used to do that. That's where I got it, because I knew some Indians in Thief River. That's a place. They used to come over there. Wrap them in mud and bake them in the fire, and then when this freight would come through, the engineer would go beep, 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 beep a couple of times, and I'd run up there, or I'd be standing near there, because I knew that when the freight was coming through, and I'd give them one of these big fish, and they used to expect that.
Kind of payment for your travel.
They didn't mind me riding on their freights at all. I was only about 15 or 14 when I was out in Seattle, and I tried to get aboard a ship, get a job aboard a ship. And this chief quartermaster says, "How old are you?" And I said, 18. And he said, "You look awfully young for being 18. They wouldn't take me on the ship, but I like to travel. I always did like to travel. That's why I enjoyed the Navy so much, and the Air Force. And
well, you couldn't travel like that today, could you? Kids couldn't do that.
Flying all over.
Were you afraid of getting beat up or anything?
I loved it. You don't get afraid if you like something, you know. And but I was in the Navy. I came back to the States in November. Yeah, it was November of 1943. These kids have heard the story so often that because I like to talk about it. That I wish I was still young enough to keep going, but when you get up around 90, you're kind of slow down a little.
Well, you don't seem like you've slowed down any to me. You're doing great. Where did you go for your basic training when you joined the Navy?
Illinois.
And what was basic training like? What did you have to go through? Did you have to learn to use a weapon?
Remember, I enjoyed it, whatever it was.
Most people don't like it.
How to march and how to salute and how to say sir when they ask me a question, you know. And I enjoyed it. A lot of people are afraid of boot camps. You know, we've got a nephew no, grandson that should go into the service, I feel, because he doesn't seem to be ambitious to go anywhere, and I think he's afraid of boot camp. These Army boot camps are terrible. I know I talked to guys that crawl in mud and they're shot at and missed, and there's another word that goes along with that.
I know exactly what you mean.
You know, and they're real rough because they are in bad shape. They're on the front lines. The Marines, they just about beat them to death, you know, with all the boot camp and everything. Oh, it's terrible. I've talked to Marines. I knew a lot of Marines too. And in fact, I had a couple of good friends that were Marines that got killed. But the boot camp where I was in Great Lakes, Illinois, was nice. I enjoyed it. And from there, I went to Las Vegas to go to Fort Island for radio operator training. And then from there, I went straight to Hawaii, and I was in PBYs, patrol planes. We're flying all the time. In fact...
Now when you first entered the service, this was before Pearl Harbor?
Well, yeah, that boot camp and training at San Diego was before I started flying with the
right.
Yeah, Navy.
Would do you think that the military is good for young kids today? Did it do you good? Did it make you a better man?
I sure think so. They will straighten them out. You get a hard. Well, I was going to use a word probably shouldn't use.
Well, that's okay.
A hard-ass sergeant in there that'll teach them how to act.
Right.
And it'll straighten them up. If you don't do this, you're going to be punished. That was the idea. And it's not violent punishment or anything, but they'll take away a little privilege of theirs or something, you know. And they teach them a lot of things. They need that. These kids today, they just get no training whatsoever. If you slap your kid, if you spank your kid, a kid can stand up there and say, I'm going to report you for child abuse.
You're
that
right.
grandson of mine, for example, he was sitting there one day and he kept, he kept rubbing his feet against that part where you put the feet when you put the chair out, and I said, you better stop that. I said, you're going to wear that thing out. And he just kept it. Did that to me. Kept doing it. And I said, you keep that up and I'm going to slap you silly. And he said, you touch me and I'm going to call the police and have you arrested for child abuse. That's the way kids are.
I know it. Most kids today don't have discipline, do they?
They have no respect.
No respect.
Anything. And you don't dare touch them because if you do, you go to jail.
That's true.
You spank your kid. These kids had their spanking. Those kids, that kid, I remember one spanking. I call her anybody under 90 years old as a kid.
That's right.
They kept screaming and screaming and screaming. One day I told these 4 kids to shut up or I was going to spank them. They kept on screaming about something and fighting. You know how kids, brothers and sisters, fight up real often. So I lined them up, put them over my lee, and bang, 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 gave them 3 of them, and I shut them up. But if you dare do that now, they call the police and you go to jail.
You're right. You're right.
Spanking your kids and straightening
But
up.
that's one good thing about the military. It will teach you discipline and respect.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's good. Well, where did you go? You said you went to Hawaii, and you were flying on the planes.
The patrol planes.
Yeah, patrol.
PBYs.
And where did you go?
Catalinas, I call them.
Where did you go from Hawaii?
Well, we hit every island, and as the war progressed, I went through the Battle of Midway. My squadron went through that, where we started stepping Japs back to Japan. You know, we sank a bunch of their ships and everything. And we lost 3 aircraft and crews that day. And and then from there, the Marines said they had the Guadalcanal. They kept moving up closer. You know, they had Guadalcanal and it was secure. They said so. Our squadron moved in there so we could patrol around there and sink some of their Jap ships. Yeah. And their secure was kind of, I think, was kind of edgy because there were 6,000 live Japs still on that island, and every night there would be bombing. We were flying off Henderson Field, but every night They were bombing that place. And every day we lined up for cover, because they lined us up early in the morning so the snipers couldn't see us. But those Japs would climb a palm tree, and they'd be sitting there or hanging up there waiting for us to come out there, and they'd snipe and get one man every time, every day. And then the Marines would come out there and they'd brrrr, and you see this guy come down all shot up. But that secure business was 6,000 live Japs.
It wasn't real secure, was it? Yeah.
But we lost all our aircraft. Some were shot as they went out, some were bombed out. We were losing men because of malaria and dengue fever and everything that an American gets in those foreign places. You know, those natives were get accustomed to all their stuff. The Americans come down there, would take pills and everything. We took Atterbury, that was for malaria, and some of them wouldn't take it because they were real bitter. And as you took them, you get more and more yellow. No fooling, you were just as yellow as 11. But when we finally left there were 28 of us left out of 350 men in the squadron. Only 28 of us. So a lot of them had died from malaria and dengue fever. A lot of them had been shipped out for wounds, and most had been shipped out for diseases. A lot of them, we lost the aircraft. Our aircraft were all gone. They were either destroyed or we lost them at sea.
Well, tell me about Pearl Harbor, because I was just a kid, I guess, when that took place. What were you doing the morning that the Japanese attacked?
I was flying all the time, but on that particular Sunday, I'm a Catholic, but I wasn't a very good Catholic. Most of us, a young man, I was 25 at the time, most young men would much rather be in Honolulu drinking beer and chasing girls than to go into a church and to be told what a big sinner we were, see. So as a consequence, I was the same way, and I didn't go to church, but the week before the Japs hit us, there was something, I was working my aircraft. We had been out, but something kept prodding me, go to church, go to church, go to church, and they had just you ever believe in guardian angels? Well, mine was after me, real bad. Well, we came in on Friday, we had lost both generators on our aircraft. We had one on each engine, we had twin engines. And it was a bad job trying to get those things back in because we had to take the cowling off and take a bunch of tubes off and a bunch of wires off and everything. So we worked on that. We came in on Friday. We worked on it all day Saturday, from early in the morning, from 7 o'clock in the morning till it was dark. And we didn't have them finished yet. And I was training 2 more young men for radio operators. First operator, I was the first one, the second radio operator, we were flying.
In case something happened to you.
And on Saturday nights, I said, we've got to have this aircraft ready by, I was a third-class petty officer, which was the same as a buck sergeant, see. I said, we've got to have this aircraft. Now, if you kids want to go to church, go to church. If you don't go to church, be on the wings here at 7 o'clock in the morning, because we've got to have this aircraft ready. We knew the Japs were out. We didn't know where they were going. And they had us patrolling southwest all the time. Patrolling. And actually, I think the president knew they were coming in from the northwest, because that's the way they came. But on Sunday morning, I didn't feel like going to church either. But I thought, boy, that guardian angel was pounding on me. So I went to church, and church was just over. And we heard all this booming and rattling and all machine guns going off. And the Army used to pull surprise attacks on us every while. And
you thought it was a drill?
Dud bombs, and they'd have blank automatic or machine guns, you know. And I said, boy, that Army's really making it realistic today. And about then this Marine came down and said, all men report to their ships and stations immediately. The Japs are attacking. So I started running down, heading back to the base. We were at Kailua in Hawaii, and it was 5 miles from Kaneohe Bay, and I started running back. I was the only one from Conegoy that day. There were some Army guys and everything. They were going the other way. And an officer picked me up, and we went over and he dropped me off. He was a lieutenant. He dropped me off at the administration building, and my barracks was 100 yards over here. And I started running for it there, and here a machine Jap saw me running. They were trying to shoot everything that moved. Anything that moved, animals or anything. And that goddamn machine gun shooting at me, and I was ducking this way and I ducking that way. And I finally made it, but those 20 millimeters I think he was shooting, and they'd hit the ground. I'd be over here and one hit there, and they exploded. And I got in there. He chopped all the windows out of the goddamn barracks anyway. So I had a brand new tailor-made Navy uniform. Cost me $15. Tailor-made, and I wasn't going to get blood on it. I expected with all the shooting that was going on. There might be blood, and they told me I couldn't get blood out of my uniform if I got it, so I wanted to change that. I tore my uniform off and jumped into my fatigues and ran back to the aircraft. My aircraft was laying there like this. It was all shot up. The three kids, two of them were laying at the end of the wing, dead, the two new ones. My second radio operator was crawling, trying to get under cover, and I ran over there and dragged him under cover, and there wasn't anything I could do. There were guys laying over. They shot. We had 158 casualties, and my squadron had the duty that day. VP-11 and VP-14 were in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and we had the duty on. We were working on our aircraft, and I dragged that second radio operator of mine under cover because they came back the second attack, and they were trying to get everything that they'd missed the first time. They didn't miss much, and there were a bunch of 50-gallon drums there, and I ran for those things to hide behind them because they were strafing everything that moved. You know, if you moved, they had 3 or 4 aircraft after you, and I hid behind there. And I found out later that they were 50 gallons of high-octane gasoline. If they would have hit one of those, the whole thing would have gone over.
You'd have been up there with your guardian angel.
Then, we expected an attack that night. Sure, they could have sit there. If the Japs would have sent a landing party in there, they'd have taken the island.
Right.
Because they had devastated. There wasn't an aircraft up. There were 2 of them that had been out on patrol, fighters, and they were the only 2 aircraft that were left in Hawaii. They came back in, but they gave me, since I was the same as the buck sergeant, I was in charge. I was an NCO, and they gave me a machine gun with 1 extra belt, 50 rounds. They gave me 2 guys with rifles. They each had 1 extra clip, 10 rounds. I had a 45 caliber pistol with 1 extra clip, so another 10 rounds. And they said, stand by to repel boarders, a Navy expression, you know. And if they would have just put a couple of men in there, they'd have taken that island, because everybody was devastated. So we stayed there all that night. I'd been up at 6 or 6:30 Sunday morning. We were up there on the hill, on the beach, all night long. The next morning came down to get chow, and they said, you're being transferred to Pearl. So I went to Pearl, no sleep. They put me out on the aircraft. VP-51 had come in from Las Vegas, San Diego. So, and they'd been flying all night, so they needed radio operators. So they changed crews, and I went on that thing and flew all that day. So that flight, I was up for about 48 straight hours. And by that time, you get to where you can't sleep. You just
you're so exhausted. Yeah.
And so from there.
Well, when you left the church and you were running back towards your barracks because you wanted to get your new uniform off before it got blood on it, what were you thinking about? Were you worried about getting shot? Did you get hit?
because we didn't know. We knew the Japs were out, but we didn't think they were stupid enough to attack Pearl.
Yeah.
You know, that were all our battleships and everything were. So, but Monday morning, when I went to sent me over to Pearl, I saw all those ships laying there, and they were burning, and bodies all over the place. I had to get in the boat to go, because Pearl City there was a bay across there, you know, and you had to go in a boat. So I went across there, and all that oil was about that thick, and there were bodies floating all over there. You know, we lost a couple thousand people, men right then, and I remember all that. It was pretty.
But you were scared because you were a young man.
No, I didn't have brains enough to be scared. I was excited. Speaking of being scared, well, anyway, oh, damn it.
That's okay.
A good buddy of mine and I were on this ship. We'd never been on a ship crossing. We went from San Diego to Pearl on the ship. And we were standing out there. The ship was going like this and going up, and the water was blazing all the way back. And I heard a quartermaster say, "Look at those stupid kids. They're too excited to be, too excited to be sick and too stupid to be scared." We weren't afraid. For some reason, I've never been afraid of anything. Nothing. I don't know why. I've been shot at, and I've been in accidents, and in this book, that kid was a very good friend of mine, and we were, Sosnowski was my chief pilot in that book. I flew with everybody because I loved to fly, and anytime somebody was sick or something, well, I would...
Why don't you hold that up and I'll take a picture of it.
I would, every time somebody was sick or something like that, I would gladly take their place. But I was due to fly with Sosnowski this particular morning, and Llewellyn, that was that kid's name. Llewellyn was a good typist, and you know, the military has papers that high, you gotta be typed. And then you gotta make 4 or 5 copies, and everybody, if there's a mistake, you gotta redo it. So they were using him as typing all the time, and he was a radio operator, so he came out that morning and he asked me if he could take my place, because he needed flight time. He had to get 4 hours a month, you know, to get flight pay 50%. And so I asked Sosnowski, nobody liked him. He was an oddball. As I said, he should have been a fighter pilot instead of a patrol plane pilot. And I asked Sosnowski, and he said, "He's a good operator?" And I said, "Yes, he's a very good operator." And he said, "Well, okay." So the kid took my place. They never came back. We went out. He said, "Well, I'll see you tonight, Chet." And I said, "Well, okay." And they didn't come in. And so the next morning, we went out, 3 aircraft. Down his route, you know, they know exactly where we went. And we searched there for 3 days and never saw nothing. Usually when an aircraft crashed, we would find a body, or we'd find
piece of wreckage or something.
We'd find wreckage,
you
know, cushion floating. We found nothing, and they can't understand how that aircraft could have disappeared without leaving something. And they have, a lot of them thought maybe they'd been shot down by a destroyer, a Jap destroyer, because there were Jap ships floating around there all the time. We were always looking for Jap ships to drop a few bombs on them. And they thought maybe they shot them down, and then they went over and picked up the aircraft and took it home with them, because they can hoist those things, you know, and put it on the ship.
Well, you know, when during World War, after Pearl Harbor, here in Arkansas and in Texas, a lot of places, they had what was called internment camps, where they took all these Japanese people that were American citizens and they put them in these camps. And they couldn't go anywhere. Did you ever think about that that was a good thing, that we put those people up like that so they couldn't help the enemy?
we got other things to think about, you know. But I was in Japan after, I was in Japan as Air Force.
Of course.
Let's see, when was
Yes. What year?
I? Or was it?
What year, Daddy?
I was in Japan at the Yokosuka Naval Air Station. Must have been during the Navy. Yeah, after the war, I was stationed at Guam. Yeah, that was in 1945. I was stationed in Guam. The war was over. I was in Guam when the war ended. I'd been flying there, and I used to fly with a bird colonel. He'd come over, or he'd sent a guy over to pick me up. I don't know how I can't remember how I got to meet him, but I had gone over to this Army station to get some flight time because I was a combat air crewman and I got permanent flight skins. And this colonel was going out. He needed time, and he asked me if I could fly. Well, I'd been flying up for these PBYs because every man had knew how to take it home if pilots were shot up. And Cook was shot once. He got it right in the head, and we thought we were going to go down. Little things like that, like they're coming up now, see. But the colonel got in the front seat, and I got in the back seat of this aircraft. And he says, "You know how to fly it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure. I flew PBYs and SNVs and SNVs." And he says, "Well, take her over." And he relaxed and fell asleep. And we flew for about 3 hours, and when he finally woke up, he says, "This is the only rest I ever get with all that paperwork and everything." He says, "I'll see you next month." And he sent a car over to pick me up, a Jeep. I went back to the Army place there, and he'd say, "Okay, you ready?" And I'd say, "Yep." And he'd take her off. So up I'd go. I'd fly for 2 or 3 hours, you know, and he'd be sleeping all the time. And the only trouble is, my right eye was not good. And you've got to have both eyes for depth perception. And I'd come to bring her, he'd say, "Bring it home." And I'd come down there and he'd say, "You're too high, you're too high." Up I'd go and swing around and come in there and he'd say, "You're too low, you're too low." And I never, with the thousands of hours I've flown, I have flown B-17s, B-29s, and PBYs and everything else, and I have never landed an aircraft.
Never landed one.
I can take them off.
Yeah.
To just sit there and...
Well, this whole time that you were in the Navy or you're in the military service, what was the food like that they fed you? Was the meals good? Was it as good as your mama fixed at home?
Sure wasn't. We were in, when we were at Guadalcanal, we were surrounded. I told you about that. Japs were sinking all our supply ships, and they were bombing us every night. And we were, some Army artillery had some horses they'd gotten somewhere. I don't know. They were pulling their heavy gizmos up in the mountain. When they'd get bombed and those horses got wounded or something, they'd kill them, you know, cut them up, and we ate them. They're not bad either. But we ate snakes and parrots and monkeys. When they skinned a monkey, it looked like a little baby hanging up there, you know. But we ate them, and you get hungry enough. I weighed 165 pounds when I got to Guadalcanal. I weighed 98 pounds when I got back to San Francisco. That's a good way to lose weight. But
well, what about the meals when you were at in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor, where they had a mess for all of you? What were the meals like in there? What did they serve? I've never been in the military, so I don't know what.
Well, most of them are pretty good, but there are good cooks and there's bad ones. When we were coming back from, I don't know, it must have been, I don't know where it was. Well, this old ship we were on, they were, I think it was when we were coming back to the States from Guadalcanal. They didn't have any cooks, and I had worked in my dad's restaurant, and I knew how to cook, and I cooked all the time. I got a couple of guys to help with the mess hall, you know. I did the cooking, and they said that was the best meal they'd ever had in their lives. But generally, there are good cooks and there are bad cooks. Some of them will take a perfect steak and make a mess out of it, you know, just burn it all up or something, you know. But others, they can take a hamburger and make you think you're eating a tenderloin steak or something. But yeah, after the Navy, I came home. I worked at my dad's restaurant for 8 months, and they were changing then from the Army Air Corps to the U.S. Air Force in 1958. And they wrote to me they needed men because the ones that were in the Army Air Corps, a lot of them were getting out. And they didn't want to go into this new outfit. So they wrote to me and told me if I would come in. I had been a first-class petty officer, which is the same as tech sergeant, and in the Navy. And they said that they would give me master sergeant if I would come in there. Well, I fooled around, and finally I was 6 days late to get in for that master sergeant. So they gave me a tech sergeant back, and I was tech, had to wait 3 more years to get tech sergeant. But I was flying in B-17s, and we were in Strategic Air Command, and we had carried live bombs and live machine guns all the time going around because if something happened, well, we were supposed to go on in there and support whoever needed help, you know.
Well, how many years did you serve in the military?
20 years, 6 months, and 13 days.
You know exactly.
But I got master sergeant, and I flew, well, I got a total of over 19,000 hours in the air, and I flew with them, the Air Force. Boy, it gets kind of dim after 40 or 50 years.
Well, over the years, has the military been good to you as far as taking care of your needs, and you are receiving military benefits from your service?
I don't quite get that.
Well, do you, if you get ill, can you go to a veterans hospital and will they take care of you?
The whole family, as long as they were with me, got benefit from the medics.
Well, that's good. You deserve that as many years as you
My
put
wife
in.
and I, we still go down there. I get hearing aids. You know, with all those many hours and my age, my hearing is getting worse
Right,
and worse.
I understand.
That continual grinding, you know,
Yeah.
engines going there for.
Because it's a high-pitched sound, isn't it, those engines?
That with static coming in one ear and engine noise coming in the other ear or both ears, you get out from aircraft and nobody can hear very well when they first get out of those aircraft.
Well, did you get married when you were still in the service, or did you?
I came back from the South Pacific after I'd been in the States for a while. They sent me to radar school, and then they started sending me down to various islands. I was way below the equator, some of those islands, and I'd be in there with the Marines and everything, and the engineers. The Marines would move up here and take this island. The engineers and I and everybody else, the radio operator, I was a radio mechanic as well as operator. And then we'd work on the aircraft. The fighters would come in all shot up, and we'd work on them. And then the Marines would take the next island heading toward Japan. And when they had it secure, we'd move on up there, you know. And that went on until when April of 1945. April was it? That the Japs surrendered. But that's when we dropped the bomb. I don't know when it was. It's April or later. That was in 45. And then I was in Guam, and as I said, I was flying with the Admiral. That Admiral dipped a little time into, and he was transferred, the Navy, to Chief of Staff in Washington. And of course, I always dressed real well, and I had my hair cut, and I was shaved all the time, and my uniforms were tailor-made and perfect. And he liked me, and he wanted me to come along with him to Washington. And I said, Well, I'm a short timer now, and I got a pretty little girl waiting for me in San Diego or in Wisconsin. And I said, I can't go eat. And I said, an admiral doesn't have an enlisted man. He said, I'll make you an ensign. I could have been an ensign in the Navy. But that pretty little girl attracted me. Said, oh, dang much, I just couldn't.
I think he had his eye on the little girl for a good while. Where did you meet your wife? Was she in San Diego?
She was waiting for me. Well, yeah. I had been writing to her for about 4 years, I guess.
That's where she was from, San Diego?
Wisconsin.
Oh, she was from Wisconsin.
Rapidan, Wisconsin. I was a buddy with her brother.
Oh.
And I was writing. She was only 14 years old when I started writing to her. And he said, "Ray, why don't you write a letter to my little sister once in a while, my sis?" So I wrote to the little sis, and the little sis sent me a picture, and boy, sis that's for me.
That's all it took.
That did it. So we came back. Well, she'd been to visit my folks, and of course, naturally, I had been engaged to a girl and when I went into the service, and she wanted to get married. And I said, you know, I was making about $15 a month. I said, yes, and I said, you don't get married at $15 or $30 a month. So when I was in the service, she married somebody else, which was a fine deal with me anyway. And so I ran into this pretty little girl, and next thing I knew, she met me in San Diego, and we got married there.
Well, how did you end up in Boonville, Arkansas?
Well, I don't really know. I guess we were looking for, after I'd retired, retired in 1960. No, in 46, I don't know. How did we happen to settle here? I think we were going through and everybody seemed to be so nice, we just decided to settle here.
Well, what did you do for a living after you got out of the military, after you retired after your 20 years?
I bought 80 acres of brush and rock. I was going to raise some cattle, see. I had 80 acres out here. And a guy was selling me livestock, cows. Well, farmers have cows, the cows have calves, and the calves, you sell the calves and make more money, see. So we had a good bull there and no calves. A year went by, no calves. Another year went by, no calves. Another year went by, no calves. Well, what's going on here? And veterinarian says, you've got cows that are sterile. These farmers would take a sterile cow to an auction. This joker named Foster, he's long dead now or I'd have killed him, was buying these cows for a low price, bringing them out to me and selling them to me for a high price, and they weren't any good. So we were out there for 8 years and
never had a calf.
Of course, I was getting retirement pay, you know, so
yeah.
we managed to struggle along. So I came in, I sold them all and sold the farm, and then on VA, when I went to radio refrigeration school, and then I went to work in 1970. I think I went to that refrigeration school for 9 months, and they paid me for that, you know. And then I worked for Wiggins. What's Wiggins now for a couple of months, and then during the summer of '70, I guess it was, I heard they were hiring, so I went to Fort Chaffee, and they snapped me up like that. And then at the end of this training in the summer, they used to take National Guards up there, you know, and they train them. They asked me if I'd like to stay there permanent, which was, boy, a deal, you know, government pay and everything. And I said, well, we paid for a trip to Hawaii. That was Pearl Harbor. All the squadrons that were in there went back
a reunion.
December 7th.
Yeah.
So they said, well, when will you be back? And I told them, well, I'll be back by New Year's. They said, can you come to work for 71? I said, yeah. So I went to work there, and I worked there for 13 years. Of course, when I was 70 years old, get out here and there's snow and ice, the carpool, everybody had retired in the carpool. I was alone. And I'd drive 40 miles to go to work, leave here when it was still dark, because I had to be there at 7. And I'd be there until 5. It was dark by the time you come back. Icy roads and everything. And I said, that's enough of that.
Yeah,
So,
that's hard, isn't it?
so
Yeah. Well, how did you feel when you went back to Pearl Harbor after all those years and to see the memorial? Did you feel?
I don't know. You think about your friends that you've missed, you know, all the friends, every one of those 158 men were very good friends of mine because I wasn't a nasty boss, might say. I'd say, well, let's you and I go get this done. See, I wouldn't say you or you and you get this job done. I'd say, let's you and I go get it.
That's right.
Like working on that aircraft that day on December 7th, December 6th. I'd say, well, let's get this job done, you know. So I was up there working with them. And if I wouldn't have gone to church that day, well, I'd have been just as dead as they were. Because I never saw that second radio operator of mine again. Never saw any of these kids. But
well, did the ship? What was the ship that you were on? In Pearl Harbor, what was the ship that?
I wasn't on a ship.
Oh, you wasn't on it.
Flying.
Oh, but the men that you're talking about, they were in that.
Flying in PBYs.
Well, did they?
The only ship I was ever on was when Howard, her brother, and I were on this ship going out to Hawaii. And he went into one squadron and I went into another, so we were never buddies anymore after that. And he's living in Nevada now, yet.
Well, did they bury those men there in Hawaii, or did they send them home?
Did they what?
Did they bury them there in Hawaii, or did they send them home?
Yeah, I got a picture somewhere around here where I was an honor guard for, there were 18 of us, I think, or 18 of them that were killed. And they dug this trench on Monday, and they laid them on there with flags over them. And when we had the honor guard.
Is that the picture in Black Cats and Dumbos?
The what?
Is that the picture in Black Cats and Dumbos? That book? The book Black Cats and Dumbos that Mary bought for
probably.
you. Yes,
There's 18 of my friends laying there.
Uh-huh.
And I'm the honor guard, or one of them. We had one man for each.
Well, let me ask you a question. How did you feel when the United States bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Were you clapping?
Oh, that was a happy day. I went to, I went with the Admiral, as I said, I was flying with the Admiral to Yokosuka, was that Yokosuka? Yokosuka, yeah, it's spelled Yokosuka, but it's pronounced Yokosuka.
Yeah.
Naval Air Station. We took over the Japs Naval Air Station, moved our fleet in there, and this Admiral I was flying with was the Admiral of the 5th Fleet. And you can't imagine being up there at 5,000 feet and all you can see all around there, ships. There must be thousands of ships. There's supply ships, there's battleships, there's heavy cruisers, light cruisers, destroyers, everything. There's hospital ships and everything. As far as you can see, all these ships. It's unbelievable. And I didn't have a camera or anything flying. Of course, we were going too fast to take a decent picture anyway. But I've often thought of that. I saw our fleet when it was destroyed, and I saw our fleet when it was had moved in and taken over Japan. I used to have a couple of Jap kids come over and polish up, clean up the aircraft. We shined that thing like a jewel, because that was the Admiral's aircraft, and that had to be spotless, you know. And I'd have those kids come over there, and they'd wash it and polish it. They'd wax that whole aircraft over there. They were nice little kids, but. We were at Guadalcanal. We're back to Guadalcanal again. That was the biggest part of my life, I think, because there were only 28 of us left. But 5 of the kids, there were souvenirs. We had dead Japs all over that jungle, and there are dead Marines all over there. But generally they tried to drag the Marines out and leave the Japs lay there and rot. But there were souvenirs, guns, you know, all the pistols they had, all the rifles, all the flags, all their helmets. Everybody liked souvenirs. And
Did you bring any of those home? Did you bring any of those souvenirs home?
there's a story too.
Tell that one, I like that.
These 5 of these kids wanted to go into the jungle and pick up souvenirs, and I said, well, take an armed guard with you, because we had Marines there all the time. They had arms all the time. They had everything. They had submachine guns, they had rifles, they had pistols, they had grenades, they had everything. And I said, take these Marine guards with you. And they said, no, they don't need them, because there's no Japs around here. I said, there's 6,000 live Japs around here somewhere. And they insisted. They were smart asses, you know, so they decided they'd go in there. Well, they didn't come back that night. And I asked some of the crew, have you seen those kids? No, they hadn't come back. So the next morning we went out looking for them. And we found them. They were all tied to palm trees like this, hands behind their back around the trees. And they'd used them for bayonet practice.
Killed them all.
They just stabbed them, you know, no reason for it. They just killed them. But they found, we found or I didn't, but our crews, our Marines went out there and they started looking for them, and they found this group that had done the deal, and they were bragging about it. I think there were 6 of them. There was an officer with them, and then the crew. And the officer, he was pretty smart. He said, well, he spoke English better than you and I. I mean, it was perfect. He had gone to college in the United States.
I started to say
Got
that.
all their education, you know, and goes back to Japan and went in there. And he was the one, he said, yeah, he did it. He said, but you're the enemy, so we kill enemies. But you're not supposed to kill prisoners. We never killed a prisoner. We capture a lot of Japs and we put them in a pen. But they would capture Americans and they'd kill them. They'd cut their heads off or cut their throats off or just stab them to death or something. And there was a chief petty officer of mine. He was talking to that officer, and that guy said, "You can't do anything to me." He says, "The Geneva Convention says you can't touch a prisoner." And this kid, this chief, had this automatic 45. And he says, "That's right. We can't do that, Ken. I'll have to put this down, don't I?" And I pulled the trigger and blew his head off. And he said, "Oh, nuts." I didn't know it was loaded.
Yeah, good excuse.
Of course, he didn't know it was loaded, so it was an accident, you know.
Yeah.
Nothing was done about him killing a prisoner. That isn't the word he used. But with young ladies, well, I shouldn't use profane, vulgar, and obscene language. There's quite a bit of that goes on in the service. In case you've never been in the service, you never associated with any active duty men, but they'll get to talking, get a few drinks in them, especially in the language that's pretty rough. Well, I think that about takes care of it, doesn't it? We've been going at this for, what, an hour?
Almost an hour.
Yeah, almost an hour. Well, did your wife ever get to go anywhere with you when you're in the military? After y'all got married, did she stay home?
Yeah, she went, family moved with me all over, you know.
How many children did you have?
How many did we have?
How many children did you have?
9 altogether. That was an odd thing about that, you know. When I was in the Air Force, I'd kiss my wife goodbye. I said, "I'll be back tonight." But with SAC, you never knew what was going to happen. And we'd take off, and he'd say, "Well, we're going to England." And we'd go to England, and maybe we'd gone a month or 2 months or 3 months. And I'd come back, and I'd hug my wife and kiss her. And 9 months later, there'd be another baby there. I just don't.
Don't understand that at all.
Maybe artificialness. What do they call it?
I don't think it was artificial.
Yeah, well, that happens 9 times. We have a Down syndrome kid. He was our last one. We've got a son that's working for Federal Forestry, and we've got 6 daughters that she's a teacher. And what's his Donna? Well, she was an X-ray technician until she had to quit because even the shielding was. They said she was getting so charged.
Right.
That they thought it'd kill her. Then Barbara, that's Barbara, the teacher. Donna, Judy is nurse. Mary is
Bookkeeper. She's a bookkeeper.
a bookkeeper.
Well, do most of your children live in this area close?
Tanya is a nurse. She's working with the school. And Patty Lou is working for an Army bank, an Air Force, Army, Air Force, a manager of a bank. Yeah. So they all did very well. We got one son that's a little slow about catching up with things. A little slow.
Do you like Booneville? Do you like to live here? How long have you lived here?
We moved in here. We in 1960 we moved to Arkansas, and we moved into town in 1968. You know, I think when we first got here, we were looking for a place to retire, to stay. I was retired, and we stayed at a motel down the street here, and everybody was so nice. They were just as though we were old friends of theirs. Boy, they'd known me for 20 years or so, it seemed. Come into a restaurant, and everybody was just as nice as could be. Well, how are you? Glad to see you. And started looking around, and everybody was the friendliest bunch of people you ever saw in your life. I think they were just trying to take us. but they were nice, and so we settled here.
So you don't miss the cold weather in Minnesota, huh?
Oh, boy. I want no part of that.
I know it. My brother lives there, and he tells me that when he's retired now, he's 6 years older than I am, and he retired, but he worked at a nursing home, Malastrana, I think was the name of it, and he said that, and it was only like a half a mile or a quarter of a mile from their house, and he said it had snowed so much that they couldn't get their car out,
Yeah.
but the street sweeper, the blowers had cleaned the streets, but and said that many times he walked to work and he couldn't see anything because the snow was up so high,
Yeah.
where they had blown it. And New Prague is a pretty little town. I really like it. It's
You know, I told you, I came from the South Pacific on February 10th because I was being shipped out again. And I came home and got off that train from Minneapolis, and it was 45 below zero. And
that'd make you want to go back to South Pacific, wouldn't it?
Boy, tried to get out of there. I stayed there just a couple of days. But I hadn't been home since 1940, and so my folks said they'd like to say hello to me. So.
Well, you were in the military for such a long time. You served in World War II, and you also served in the Korean conflict, didn't you?
I was in the service during Korea, but we didn't make it. We didn't get there. I was in the Air Force, I think at that time I was in an air refueling aircraft. We had a 50,000 gallon tank of high octane fuel. And these fighters that were going to Korea, they would come up under us, and we had a guy that was real good. He'd lower that boom, and he'd put it into their aircraft. Fill them. Earl Baxter Dean, a gent.
Huh.
His name was Dean, I'm sure.
Well, did you ever go to Korea? Were you ever there?
No, I didn't get over there. No.
It was over with before you got over there.
I was, what was this that she wrote? I was in the service, but I didn't make it to Korea.
I remembered you were gone.
Yeah.
You were gone.
Your husband was in Vietnam. 2 cruises. That was enough for him.
I can imagine.
One tour.
He was 1 cruise. I thought he told me he was in 2 cruises.
1 tour.
Well, my father-in-law is, he's probably about 6 or 7 years younger than you are, and he was in World War II and the Korean conflict, and he's always told me stories about how awful cold it was in Korea. And he said sometimes that the wind was blowing 25, 30 miles an hour, and it would be 40 degrees below zero.
Yeah.
He said they froze to death.
Well, I was fortunate in that when I was in the service, apparently I was in England and Italy and Germany and Spain and Portugal when I was in the Air Force.
Well, did they have pretty girls in England?
Yeah, I was never in cold weather.
No. Well, you were lucky.
Well, I don't know why.
Did they have pretty girls in England?
Oh, I was married.
Oh, you couldn't look then.
The trouble is, you get, well, I didn't get married until 1946.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice part of it is, I was in French Indochina, and there are some beautiful girls there in that they are, they're French and they're mixed with the Indian, real Indian.
Right.
And they're mixed with, you know,
Yeah.
and I had beautiful girls. But I had a friend that had picked up something. It turned out finally that it was syphilis. But when you first go into the service, they show you in the
The
military
pictures and all that
pictures
stuff. Yeah.
of what can happen to you
Yeah.
if you mess around. And I was always afraid with that, and I never touched any of them.
Yeah.
I might take them out for a drink, but I wouldn't even kiss them goodnight or anything
Yeah,
like that. I was
yeah.
afraid of that. I just couldn't see having that stuff, you know. And
Because back in those days, a lot of those diseases that you got, there was no cure. Penicillin didn't come around for a long time.
yeah, well, I understand penicillin can cure syphilis too.
Yes, yes.
But, you know, a military man go into a country, an American military man is getting probably 10 times as much as the men in this country are making, military or not.
Mhm.
And the girls just love to
Yeah.
get near them because the guys are young and they're good looking generally, they're in good health and everything. They're making a lot of money compared to their men.
That's right.
They're willing to spend it, see?
But you know, and another thing is that when an American soldier would go to one of those countries, and if he married one of those girls and brought her home, she was automatically a citizen,
Yeah, yeah.
and they couldn't run her off. She got to come to America, and that's what they wanted.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Maybe he'll marry me, you know.
Yeah.
So, all those girls, but that disease has just scared me.
I know
because
it.
I wasn't about to get that.
No, I don't blame you.
But that very good friend of mine, I remember this is a long time ago. There was a girl named Nadja in a cartoon, in a carnival show. She was a striptease. She would take down but she'd leave her brassiere on and her panties on. That was really stripping in those days, you know. Maybe she'd even leave a skirt on. But she was a very good-looking girl.
Did
Pretty
you know
girl.
all this stuff?
I think I've heard about Nigel before.
And I was the boss of the ticket takers there at the carnival. The reason we had to have a boss that was honest, that would check the ticket takers, the ones that sold the tickets, the city got a percentage of every ticket sold,
Mhm.
see? So some of these ticket takers, for a price, they'd give the ticket back to this guy that sold them. He'd sell it again and give him another
Right.
few cents. See?
Right.
So I was there, and I'd be sure that they weren't going to do that. I was getting few cents from the city for working, doing that, you know. But this beautiful girl named Nadja, it was pronounced Nadja. She was a striptease dancer in this carnival. And of course, Lloyd George was a very good-looking young fellow. He was a tall, handsome young fellow. And he was, he wanted to take her out. I said, you stay away from these carnival girls. Whatever you do, stay away from them. Because they've been messing around with men all over the United States. Wherever the carnival goes,
Right.
the girls go there, and everybody's after them.
Yeah.
I said, she might be loaded. No, she says that she's clean. She's clean. I said, you stay away from that girl.
Yeah.
Well, one night he didn't show up, and the girl approached me and asked me to take her out, and I said, no way. I said, I don't mess with carnival girls. Well, Lloyd George apparently bedded her. And I was in the service then, well, I mean afterwards. And of course he had been a very good friend of mine. And Mother said, I told Mother to say hello to George for me. And she said, well, he's sick. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows what's the matter with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sick. So when we got home, when I came home, Sis and I went over to see him because he was still alive. He kept saying he wasn't going to die until he had seen me. And we went over there, and of course he was dead, and he was a ghost. Oh,
Oh,
horrible.
that's too
He
bad.
was not the tall, handsome young fellow
Yeah.
that I'd known. It was only a couple of years. And I said, what happened? And he couldn't even talk. He couldn't get close, and he says, remember Nadja?
Mm-hmm.
I said, syphilis?
Yeah, that's too
6
bad.
days later, he died.
Yeah. Well, if you had it all to do over again, you're 25 years old again, would you join the military?
I sure would. And the deal is, I'd stay for 30 or 40 years instead of just 20.
Yeah.
Boy,
Well, that was right up your alley, though. You got to travel to all those countries,
yeah.
and you got to do things. And I know that y'all have traveled too, but I hadn't been anywhere. Bungles as far as I've ever been.
How old are you?
I'm 60.
60?
I just turned 60.
You're 60?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, you didn't look to be 60.
Well, I appreciate you saying so.
Yeah.
I visited, or that's what the book said. He came and talked to you
We didn't know him
until he came. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what do you think happened to Flight 5 Victor 2?
I don't know.
It-
Nobody knew. We searched for him for 3 days, you know. They would give us a course, and we were supposed to follow this course all the way through and report every hour, see, on that we were still going. And when they disappeared, they didn't come in that night, and they hadn't reported for some reason. And so when we went down here, looked at aircraft 50 miles on each side of the course, no sign of them at all.
Well,
And which was very odd because we lost other aircraft that were shot down, and when we get there, if anyone had made it out and the Japs hadn't killed them, usually the Japs would scrape the survivors of an aircraft. But we might find a cushion or a parachute.
but nothing was ever found.
And nothing was found of Juliana. And he was a very good friend of mine because, as I said, compared to me, he was tall and handsome, and I was short and ugly, you know. And
Well, in the book, said that you always got the girls.
we got him because the rejects, which was always pretty girls anyway, you know. But we spent, every time we got any day off or something, well, we'd go to the Royal Hawaiian Hotel where all the rich people used to go in Hawaii. You ever been to Hawaii?
Never been there.
Oh,
It's
well,
a
that
pretty
Royal
place, isn't it?
Hawaiian was
Yeah.
no sailors allowed.
You wanted to sit over there, get those papers off.
No, she's okay. She's okay. Well, let me ask you, what kind of, in your opinion, what kind of pilot was Sosnowski?
What kind of
Was he a good pilot?
Sosnowski was not a good bomber pilot. You mean the one that
The one that lost
I
the
should
plane.
have been on, and I wasn't, which shows how lucky. And but he had a bad habit. He should have been a fighter pilot. See, he was only about 21 or 22 years old. All these kids I was flying with, I was the old man of the crew. Believe it or not, at 26, I was the old man because my radio operator was 18, and my pilots were always 21, 22 years old. You know, they were grabbing these kids, running them to flight school.
Well, he was a commander, wasn't he? Wasn't he?
was plane commander, yeah.
Well, that's
Uh,
awful young for that.
They were all young.
Yeah.
Everybody was young.
Chet
Believe
was
it or not.
26 when he
70
went in.
years ago, everybody was young.
Yeah.
They were all
Uh,
17,
but
18 when they went
I was
in, and
only
he was
26. And,
Well, did he take chances? That's what the book said, that he took a lot of chances.
He did. But as I said, he should have been bomber pilot, and everybody said that. Co-pilots would go along with him, and they didn't like him at all. They didn't want to go with him because he was so reckless. He'd be up at $5,000 or $7,000 or $8,000, and he should have been a fighter buff.
Oh.
And he'd come down for the water, and actually they were supposed to get to, we were supposed to get to maybe, 50 or 100 feet from the water and report what the atmosphere was like in that area, you know. And, but he'd come down, and they always figured that he let came in too close, and he went straight in.
And he hit the water.
And he went diving straight through.
Well, now in the book, I think it said something about that he had bottomed out one of those PBYs anyway before.
Yeah.
That he had hit the water and tore it up. Didn't kill anybody, but he tore the plane up.
Yeah. Well, this one of the odd part was what they figured might have happened is that the Japs shot him down, because there were Japs floating around there all the time with the destroyers and light cruisers and heavy cruisers and battle wagons and carriers and everything. I often wish that I would have been able to take a picture of when I went to start flying with the Admiral and saw the 5th Fleet. The 5th Fleet was, I can't remember if his name was Towers or Powers. I think it was Powers, Admiral Towers I was flying with. And you could, when we were flying out of Yokosuka Naval Air Station, it used to be a Jap station. We bombed it out of existence, and then we rebuilt it, and our own fleet went in there. As far as you could see on both sides, there were ships of ours. There were hundreds and hundreds of every kind of a ship. That was the 5th Fleet.
That'd have been a nice picture, wouldn't it?
Oh boy, that would have been something if I would have been able to get that. But
well, tell me about that plane, that PBY. It's not a plane that maneuvers.
come here, I'll show you a PBY. Book written by Juliana. You may have seen there's VP-12
Yeah.
in there. It's a P.
That's, both of them with Bush. They were in the White
Oh.
House and got to present that picture. That's the picture he drew. It was Texas National Guard. They were in that together. Oh, not together. They were both in the Texas National Guard, but at different times.
Yeah.
Because Bush was in there earlier than this Mike, our son-in-law.
Well, that's nice.
So he painted that for him. and
Picture
they
with the
took him up to-
president. That's impressive.
Yeah. They
My,
invited him into the White House.
my
But that plane, it couldn't maneuver real fast, could it? Well, what I was thinking about is if a Jap plane was trying to shoot them down, they didn't have much chance, did
the
they?
thing we did was to run for clouds.
Yeah, yeah.
Or we have, those Japs would come after us, you know, and so I get some of those kids, the new ones, kamikaze planes, etc. They were suicide planes, you know, they try to get to regardless. We'd be flying, say, at 5,000 feet. That's only a mile high, you know, and these Japs would come out, and when we saw them, we'd either run for clouds, where they couldn't find us, or we'd start diving down and get as close to the water as we could. And those stupid kids, and I mean they were kids, 17, 18 years old all the time, so Japs would come down like this and try to get us regardless. And they wouldn't calculate right, and they'd go straight into the water.
Oh,
And
God.
we'd be running like mad about 50 feet off the water, you know, because I think a top speed on a PBY is about 125 miles an hour, and those Japs be flying at about 400 miles an hour, you know, and they try to get us every time. But as I said before, that Sosnowski was the type that should have been in a fighter aircraft. Because, boy, he tried to do that. He tried to make fast turns, you know.
Well, you know, that's what the book
They
said.
aren't built for that.
Julie's nephew that wrote the book said that was probably what happened, that he was screwing around or made some stupid move and maybe caught a wave, tip of the wing and flipped them over or something, and you know, but it's sad that no one ever knew what happened to him.
No, we never
You
did
know, that's
find
a
out.
shame. Well, that plane that went down on that flight, it was a brand new plane, wasn't it?
Well, it was 5A, which was, well, we'd gotten it maybe in June or something. We used to fly ones, and they were the ugliest, and or not ugliest.
Yeah.
PBY is a sweetheart to me, but they weren't as fast. I guess they'd go about 105 miles an hour, and they were so old. They were metal. Well, eventually, continual
Yeah.
vibration, it'll start falling apart, you know.
They start popping rivets.
So, we went, I think it was, August or September of, 41, or no, 40, and got new aircraft. We flew those things back to San Diego and traded them in for 5s.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's kind of hard to remember things way back, maybe about...
That's been a couple of years ago.
70 years ago.
I know it.
But anyway, for some reason or other, we traded those in for 5As for even more modern. They had all kinds of stuff in them that the 1s and 5s
Had better navigation equipment, didn't it?
Yeah, everything was better on them.
Yeah.
Radio equipment was better, and the engines were better, and everything was a lot better on them. And that's the ones we had down at Guadalcanal, and we lost every one of them.
Yeah.
Every one of them. Boy. Of course, there were only, we had only about 14 aircraft at Guadalcanal. But we had 38 aircraft. You probably saw the picture of 12P3 that's up against the hangar. That was my aircraft after it was all patched up, because when I came from church, believe it or not, I went to church. I was supposed to be I'm a Catholic, and I was supposed to be going to church, but as I told him, when you're that age and you got a bunch of young fellas, buddies, you know, let's go to Honolulu. Well, that's more attractive to chase girls and drink beer than to go to church and hear some priests say what sinners we are. Which we were, there's no doubt about it. But I think I'll bet even when he was about, say, 19 or 20, well, he thought girls were pretty nice, and maybe a sip of beer occasionally was
well, I chased her a long time.
You got yourself a pretty young lady.
Yeah, she is. Well, let me ask.
I was the first one you said hello to.
No, I want you to tell me the story. When I was here last time, you told me the story, but I didn't get it on tape. I want you to tell me the story on when you were in the plane that y'all were observers when they dropped the bomb on the Bikini Islands.
On which island?
The Bikini.
Oh, boy. I think I'm still radiated. That's odd, believe it or not. I was in the Air Force at that time, and we had to go on this mission, so we went, the Bikini Islands, they're a series of islands, you know, and we were on one of them, and they said we were gonna, the bomb was planted on this island.
It wasn't dropped, it was planted.
It wasn't dropped. They had bomb-proof buildings there. They wanted to see just what this bomb would do. The hydrogen bomb, they just made it. It was top secret. You couldn't even mention that word, hydrogen. And but they sent us out there to tell what had happened. The Navy was 50 miles out from that island, that Bikini. And,
well, now you were in a plane, weren't you?
And I was flying 50 miles away. Our aircraft was 50 miles up, and we were up to, I guess about maybe 25 or 30,000 feet. And we were flying at 41,000. That was it. We were on oxygen, and we were flying at 41,000, and we were supposed to report what happened after the bomb went off. And we were 50 miles out, and they were counting down, and the bomb went off. We were banked over like this, and that fast, that blast hit us and almost knocked us out of the air at 41,000 feet. And we looked out there, and as far high as we could see, at above 41,000 feet, there were flames. It was unbelievable. And but all these buildings and everything were bomb-proof. So they told us we had latitude and longitude of where they were supposed to be. So our navigator said, well, here it is. We were flying back in there. Here it is. And there was nothing there. And I was sending code. I was supposed to report back to the base, you know, on the code. And I said, no sign of the island. They didn't believe that. The big shots, you know, they didn't believe that. So they told us to go turn around and go fly over that area again. And there was still no island there, it was gone. And
The
but
island was gone?
yeah, everything.
I got on the computer this morning because I wanted to look about the Bikini Islands, and it said there were 18 islands in that chain, and that when that bomb exploded, 3 of them completely vaporized. They disappeared.
Nothing was there, and they found out later that it blew a hole 3 miles deep into the ocean floor. 3 miles. That's over 15,000 feet down. Well, we were up at 41,000 feet, and they had told us to stay to the left side of the blast because the wind was blowing this way, from left to right. And we had to report on what it was like. And so we flew over there, but they had made a mistake. The radiation, the wind was blowing from right to left, and we flew right through the radiation. Of course, you don't feel anything. When somebody shines a flashlight on you or something, you don't feel anything. That's about the way the radiation was. Well, we came back and reported no aircraft, no island, nothing there. As he was saying, everything was gone. And so we got back to our island, landed, and they had Geiger counters there, and they run them on us, and we were so loaded with radiation that it almost burned up the Geiger counter. And they went to the aircraft, and that was so hot that they wouldn't let us go back in and get it. We had our own parachutes, I mean, ones that we wore all the time. We knew they were good, you know. And I had a leather briefcase there I got from some girl in the States. I had a lot of girls for right to a lot of at that time. I wasn't too bad looking 90 years ago, or 75 years ago. Anyway, I had a gold fountain pen that I got from some girl, because I used that on my log. I had to write down everything, you know, everything we heard. I wanted to go back and get it. No way, you can't go back to that aircraft. We had to take all our clothes off and shower. And they gave us new clothes. The scientists were there, they put the Geiger counters on us again, we were still red hot. So, they gave us, they said there was no use giving up the new clothes because they were just radiating and just ruining them anyway. So for the next 10 years in the military, every year I had to go for a check, a radiation check. There were 13 of us on that aircraft that day. There were 8 crew members and 5, let's see, no, 8, well, there were 13. There were 3 scientists, I guess, 3 or 4. Anyway, I finally said, every year while I was in the service, they gave me a check, and I was still radiated. And I had asked one doctor or scientist there, I said, well, how long before I'm going to cool off? And he said, about 300 years.
Well, what happened to the rest of them, the rest of the men on the plane?
Well, I finally asked that, what happened to the rest of the crew? Because the doctor told us that we would get blood cancer and we wouldn't live 6 months. That's what they told us on the island after they got the Geiger counter. So they said you will not live past 6 months. You may as well enjoy yourself now. And here I am. So one day I asked the doctor down at the VA if they knew whatever had become of the rest of the crew. And the next time I went down there, they said they checked all the records and everything, and they found that they had all died. I was the only one that lived. They got blood cancer, and I was the only one that was still alive. And I jokingly said, well, they couldn't understand why I was still alive. And I said, well, I know that. I was such a nasty young fellow when I was a young fellow that the devil himself didn't want me down there, and the good Lord said, well, we'll give him a few more years and see if he'll straighten up.
And did you? Did you straighten
I straightened up pretty well. She got a hold of me.
Okay.
Yeah, she's watching some program.
And you're still going to church, aren't you?
Huh?
You're still going to church, aren't you?
I'll tell you what, at Pearl Harbor, or let's see, Yeah, it was at Pearl Harbor. I was at church. And I thought I didn't go to church too often. But Kailua was 5 miles away, and I was working on the aircraft because we lost both energy generators, and the radio operator had to put those generators in. We worked on those all day Saturday, but something during the week kept poking me on the shoulder and said, "You better go to church. Better go to church. Better go to church." No, I didn't want to go to church. I had to get that aircraft ready for Monday. But finally I said, well, I'll go to church. And I went to church 5 miles down. Church was over and we heard all this booming and banging. And I thought the Army used to play games on us. They'd make us sneak there, shoot blanks and drop imitation bombs that would blow up, you know. And so I got back to the base. I started running to base because a Marine came and said, all men report back to your ships and stations immediately. Japs have attacked. Nobody believed it. We knew the Japs were out, but all the big shots said, no, they wouldn't come to Hawaii. And if they did come, they'd come in this way. And that's the way we look for them down southwest. We look that way every day. And actually, they were coming from the northwest. They were smart enough to know that we wouldn't be looking for them there because the ocean was much too rough in that area. So I got back to the base, and there my aircraft was laying like this, and my two radio operators, or the two kids that were being trained, they were on job training, and my second radio operator, the two kids were laying at the bottom of the wing, all shot up dead. It could be blood all over the place. My second radio operator was crawling, trying to get under cover, and I ran and got him under cover, and here they made a second attack, and there were some big drums, or 55-gallon drums, and of course everybody had to hunt for cover, you know, and I ran for those things and ducked behind them while the guys were scraping everything, 50 caliber, 20 millimeter guns, you know, and everything. And after the attack, I went out and helped pick up more wounded guys and everything. And the guy said, "Strom, I understand you were back of those barrels." And I said, "Yeah, I was undercover." And they said, "They're 55 gallons of high-octane gasoline." I think there was 4 barrels there, and if one of them would have hit that, I'd have gone up like, just so you know, I check things the next time.
I'll bet that's true. Well, did you ever get to fly a PBY? Did you fly one?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't land them because they were clumsy to land, actually. They were hard to land. If you went on water, you had to get it just right. If you got too low, well, water would be all over and you might sink you. If you got too high, you have to go around again. But I flew, when we were flying, well, I would be steering it, you know, and because you're in there for, well, maybe 12 hours a day every time you did. Pilots get pretty tired just sitting there steering that thing. So I flew that a lot, and I was pretty handy. I was told by, at the time, he was Ensign Cook. He was in Alabama the last time he called. After about 30 years, I got a call one day. He was a good pilot and a real nice guy. An officer was not supposed to invite an enlisted man to a party. You know, that was no-go. Officers for officers, but Cook used to invite me over to his house. He had quarters. He was married. He had quarters, and he'd invite me over there, and we'd have a good time. There'd be a bunch of officers' wives that were with him, you know. And he introduced me as a lieutenant colonel, a lieutenant commander. I remember one pretty nice-looking young lady. She says, "Well, you call me." I was a lieutenant commander to her. I never called her.
But you didn't have any formal training to fly a plane. They just taught you what you need to know.
Yeah, Cook used to tell me, he says, "You're ready for Annapolis or for this place where they train
the academy
pilots, you know."
Yeah.
But when I was in Guam, war was still on. But there was an Army Air Corps base there. And one day I went over there because I was on, they called me a combat air crewman. And I had permanent flight pay. But I had to get 4 hours a month in, see. So I got a Jeep and went over there one time from where the naval base was. And we were just repair outfit. Planes would come in and repair everything we could on at that time. But I'd go over there and get my 4 hours. So there was, I was flying with a lieutenant colonel, and he said, can you fly one of these? And I said, well, I don't know. It's a small aircraft, 2-passenger job, you know. I mean, a pilot and a passenger. And I said, well, I've flown a PBY. He says, no sweat. So he said, take over. So I started flying with him. And he would send a Jeep over to pick me up every month. I was there, I guess about 7 or 8 months at Guam. And he'd send a Jeep over to pick me up, and he'd bring me back, and he'd say, you ready to go? I'd say, yes, sir, and he'd say, take her off. So the way to go. So I'd take off. But the first time we came back after a flight, he said, well, let's go down. Let's take her down. And he'd take her down, Strom, so out I'd go. And he'd, you're too high, you're too high, you're too high, so around I'd go. My right eye was not right, and depth perception, you've got to have perfect eyes for depth perception. You might reach for something and it isn't there because, so he'd say, bring her around, so I'd bring her around. He'd, you're too low, you're too low. Off we go. And I used to fly with him every month. He said I could take it off, and he'd sit in the pilot seat, and I'd be in the gunner seat in back, but there's controller stick there. And he'd say, okay, take off, Strom. So off I'd go, and he'd fall asleep, and he'd sleep for about 3 hours. And he always told me, he says, this is the only rest I get. And because those military officers, especially in offices, they don't get any rest. There's paperwork that high all the time. They work 18 hours a day, you know. So I got some pretty good flying with those things. Well, then when I got into the Air Force, I started flying B-17s, and I flew them. I didn't land them or take them off, because they're a big aircraft, and you got all these levers here, and you got all these instruments here, and you got to watch all that. But I flew with Cook and off. He'd let me take it off, or let me fly as soon as he got off the ground, you know. And one day, as I just started saying, I liked Cook. He was one of the nicest young fellas you ever saw in your life. He's on that list somewhere around here.
Right here.
And one day I got a call, and he said, hello, is this Strom? And I said, yes. And he says, get on the radar and tell me where we are. We're lost again. He always, the navigator we had would lose us. We could fly a block away, and he didn't know which way to get back. And I said, good god dang grief, this must be it must be Ensign Cook. And he says, well, I made a little better than Ensign. And I says, what, did you wind up an admiral or something? And he said, no, but I did make captain, so with Bird Journal, that'd be same as a Bird Journal, you know. So, and he asked me to write a letter and tell him everything I'd been doing since the last time I saw him. I wrote him a long letter, and I never heard from him again.
Oh, hey.
I don't know what happened to him.
Well, you know, something I read in the book about the flight that disappeared, that Julie was supposed to go to flight school. He was going to be a pilot, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Well, wasn't that a shame?
Yeah, it was too bad. Well, it was a shame for all of these kids that got lost, you know. But as I told him, I was supposed to fly. He was actually on Sosnowski's crew. He was assigned to Sosnowski's crew. But as you know, he was a good clerk typist, and there is a jillion pages. You have to be typing all the time to fill out all the deals. Yeah, everything comes in. It's got to be typed in triplicate or quadruplet or something, you know. And so they would take him over there because the regular typist, floor typist they had, they'd make some of them make a mistake. Then it has to be. You can't just write it as scribble it off and put in the word. You gotta have that perfect. And he would be sitting there driving and watching that, and he would get going at 60 miles an hour, you know, and he never made a mistake, so they used him every chance they could. But he was actually assigned to Sarge Johnson's crew, but everybody else would fly in his place. And I used to fly with Sarge Johnson quite often because nobody wanted to fly with him. He was reckless, and he was careless, and he was stupid, and he'd do things that ordinary bomber pilot wouldn't do.
And so he would be sent over there to type, and people would take his place. But
Yeah.
on that day,
Yeah,
you were going on the flight, but he needed some flight time, didn't he?
yeah.
To get his pay.
So Sarge asked Sarge Johnson if he could get his time in there in my place. I was supposed to take the flight that day. And Sarge Johnson says, well, he's a good operator, Strom, and I said, one of the best. So,
Well, God had different plans for you, didn't he?
see you
He
tonight.
wasn't wanting you to go because you survived a lot of unusual things.
Well, he came home and he took care of business, and he got 9 kids.
And that's what he wanted, all those kids.
I said, I'll see you tonight.
Yeah,
Julie, they called him Julie, and I think his first name was Peter.
Pete. Yeah.
But Julie was a good kid, boy, and he had a way with women you wouldn't believe. He wasn't that handsome, he was masculine, you know.
Yeah.
Some of these pansies that we had there kind of wondered about if they were sex or female. Whether
Well,
they
you
were
know,
male or female.
in the book, that I read the book and I really enjoyed it, and it talked about he was from a real good Italian family,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they were probably Catholic too, but he lost a sister. She died. I think her name was Ray. She died about 6 months before he disappeared.
Oh, is that right?
And in the book it said that the family just went to pieces. Said they used to have big parties and stuff, all of them together, but after the girl died, then he disappeared. You know, the grandmother she didn't want to do anything.
It's
she
been
just-
so long since I read that book, I don't even remember.
Well,
what
it
was in
is really good though. He really did a good job. I'm gonna write him a letter if he's still in Colorado. I know where that school's at.
I remember when that, quite a while ago that he was here for 3 days. He taught
Yeah.
me.
Well, the book was published in '99.
Oh,
So yeah, and so it's been 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So, and he probably he told me when he came. The book said when he came to visit you, and he in the book he said he really enjoyed his visit with you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and he's visited with a lot of different people that knew Pete or Julie, as y'all called it.
yeah.
And
yeah. Well, he had a personality that was unbeatable, and everybody liked him. You know, you find some guy that you just don't like him at all. The minute you meet him, you hate him, and you hope you never see him again. But Julie,
but
Julie, I don't know, that kid, it was probably in the book. I can remember this particular, we were always flirting with girls, you know. When you're 25, 30 years old, or 26 years old, you flirt with everything with a skirt on. And I remember this one particular time, there was a really cute little girl, waitress in a beer joint. And I was flirting with her, trying to date her up. No way, no way, no way. Yeah, we were drinking beer, he and I. And so when we decided to leave, he walked over. He says, "What time will you get through working?" She said, 5 o'clock. He said, "I'll pick you up." And they did. That way. He could pick up a girl that fast. As I said, he wasn't that extremely handsome. He was not a movie actor or handsome
Yeah.
kid, you know.
But he was a real good athlete. It said in the book that he played football and all the sports in high school, and that he was and it told a lot about him. I thought it was really a good book because this nephew of his that wrote the book had never met him.
Yeah.
That he died before this boy was even
Yeah.
born, and so I thought it was really nice of him to write that, especially for the family.
Yeah.
Because he talked about the family quite a bit. He talked about you quite a bit. And one thing that he did say in the book that I thought was a mistake, and he probably just got his notes wrong, he said that you had a real strong Arkansas accent. Yeah, and
I don't know what an accent is. It seems to me.
No.
I speak English, and that's about it.
Well, I think that he confused. He just forgot that you were from Minnesota,
Yeah.
and he wrote in the book that you were from Arkansas. When I read it, I said,
Yeah.
"Nah, he made a boo-boo."
Well, there's an odd thing about my mother was from a Polish German family. My father was from Norwegian, and I think he got one of these Irish brides that when they sent a whole bunch of Irish people over here, you know, way back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Somewhere, I think that he bought one of them. You know, you pay for the fare, and she would live in. She was just a little tiny thing. I can remember her. I didn't know I'd see her until she was my grandmother, you know. But I can remember her. She was a real smiley, active young lady, but she was real small. She was about that tall and about that big, you know. They both died, of course, many, many, many years ago.
Well, you had a brother, didn't you?
Yeah, Dave.
Whatever happened to him?
Well, he, believe this or not, which shows you what can happen. She was in high school and he quit, and I think in the junior year, and he went to Montgomery Ward and asked for a job, and he got a job sweeping floors there. I think about 50 cents a day. And then they advanced him a little bit, and they advanced him a little bit, and then they sent him to a different town where he was working for Montgomery Ward, and he finally wound up in Oakland managing the biggest Montgomery Ward store they had in the United States. And he was managing that. He had about 100 people working for him, I guess. But he lived, his wife had died, and they only had one kid, and a little girl. I don't know whatever become of her name. She got married to some guy named Kidder. But he had beehives in the mountains, and he went to check his beehives, and he was coming back. You've been in California, the roads are like
Yes.
this.
She was born in California.
Oh, is that right? He was at, can't remember what town. Well, anyway, he was coming back from there, and he was going up the road here, and a woman decided to pass somebody, and she came down and caught him, you know.
Oh.
And he went into the ditch. And they said he was still alive when they were trying to cut him out, but he died, bled to death before they could get him out.
Well, it's too bad.
So,
How old was it when he passed away? How old was he?
I can't remember. He's 4 years older than I was, and I can't remember how old he was or when that happened. Really, it must have been in the 60s. I retired.
Well, then he was, if that happened in the 60s,
Yeah.
he was,
He was born in 1909, and I was born in 1913.
well, he was probably in his 40s when, 45 maybe, when he passed away.
I don't know. Well,
He didn't ever go in the military service? He was not in the military?
No, he wasn't. He couldn't see very well.
Oh.
He needed glasses when he was just a kid. I remember that. And they used to call him Four Eyes, and he'd punch them out, and then they wouldn't call him Four Eyes anymore. I remember when I started in Norfolk School, I was 6 years old, and of course there's a bully in every school. There's always a bully, and a new kid is it. And these bullies used to push me around, you know, and of course I'd come home, and Dave heard about it, and he says, well, I'll show you how to do that, see? So when we went to school this one day, I was only 6 and he was 10, and this bully come up and he's going to punch me out, and Dave walked up to him and punched him in the mouth, and he said, that's what you do when there's to these bullies. You don't try to run away from them, punch them in the mouth. So I learned how to punch them in the mouth. Never had any bully trouble anymore after that.
Was that the?
That was at Guadalcanal.
That was at Guadalcanal. But any other time in the service, did you ever get in trouble for fighting or stuff like that?
I didn't fight anymore. I was too small. Everybody was bigger than I was. And apparently, I wouldn't agitate anybody, and I drink with everybody if they wanted to drink. I chased women with them if they wanted.